Greetings friends. Thanks for stopping by for a visit. If you enjoy the video, please subscribe.
I honestly expected to take these stories to my grave because I know how they sound. I'm retired, and live by myself in a little beach house on Lake Huron, just outside Rogers City. Most evenings you'll find me sitting out on my back deck with a cup of coffee or a beer, just listening to the waves and watching the lake until after dark. It's quiet out here, not much going on. I don't go looking for weird stuff, and I've never been the type to believe every UFO story online. But over the years I've seen two things over that lake that I still can't explain, and they've stuck with me ever since. With all of the news coming out recently, I'd figure I'd share. The first thing happened maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I don't remember the exact date, but it was sometime in late summer because it was warm enough to be outside after dark. I was sitting on my back deck like I usually do, probably around 10 or 11 at night. The lake was almost perfectly calm. You know those nights where you can hear every little wave hitting the shore because there's no wind? It was one of those. At first I noticed what I thought was a bright star low over the lake. Then another one showed up beside it. Then another. Before long there were maybe 7 or 8 of these glowing lights just hanging out there over the water. What caught my attention wasn't just that they were bright. It was how they moved. They weren't blinking like airplanes, and they weren't drifting like lanterns. They seemed to know where each other were, if that makes sense. They would spread apart, then come back together into different shapes. Sometimes they'd make kind of a loose line, then they'd shift into something more like a triangle before rearranging again. I remember standing up because I figured maybe I was seeing helicopters from a distance, but there wasn't a sound. Out here sound carries over the water pretty well at night. I've heard fishing boats miles away before. These things were completely silent. I watched them for what felt like 15 or 20 minutes. I wish I had grabbed my phone sooner, but honestly I was more interested in figuring out what I was looking at. By the time I thought to record it, they were farther away, and my old phone camera just showed little blurry dots. It looked like nothing, so I deleted the video later. The strangest part happened near the end. Instead of all flying off together, they started disappearing one at a time. Not fading exactly. More like they'd brighten for a split second, and then they were just gone. One after another until there was only one left. That last one sat there for maybe another minute before it shot sideways faster than anything I've ever seen and vanished too. I sat outside another hour thinking maybe they'd come back. They never did. For weeks afterward, I tried coming up with explanations. Military exercises, drones, reflections, satellites, you name it. Maybe there's something obvious I'm missing. I don't know. I'm not saying it was aliens. I'm just saying I've lived on this stretch of Lake Huron for a long time. I've watched planes, weather, boats, meteor showers, northern lights, all kinds of things. Whatever those lights were, they didn't behave like anything I'd seen before or since. The second one is the one that really bothers me because I honestly can't come up with a reasonable explanation for it. This happened about a year ago. It was later in the fall, so the sun was already down pretty early. I had finished dinner and went out on the deck with a cup of coffee. It was probably around 8:30 or 9. There wasn't much moonlight that night, but it was one of those really clear evenings where you can see the horizon over the lake pretty well. I was just sitting there looking out over the water when I noticed what I first thought was another boat. Every now and then fishermen are out later than you'd expect, and sometimes you can only see one light depending on the angle. But this wasn't moving. It was sitting way out over the lake, low enough that I figured it had to be just above the water. It had this soft white glow to it, not harsh like an LED or flashing like navigation lights. More like it was glowing from inside itself. That's the best way I can describe it. As I kept watching, I realized it wasn't just a point of light. I could actually make out its shape. It looked long. Not huge from where I was sitting because it was pretty far away, but definitely stretched out horizontally. The closest thing I can compare it to is an old blimp or maybe a cigar, rounded on both ends with no wings that I could see. I remember thinking, what in the world is that? I stood up and walked closer to the edge of the deck to get a better look. I even grabbed the little pair of binoculars I keep by the sliding door for watching freighters once in a while. Through the binoculars it was still pretty fuzzy because of the distance, but I could tell enough that it wasn't a boat. It wasn't sitting on the water. It looked like it was hovering just above it. Then something happened that made the hair on my arms stand up. The object slowly rose another few feet, almost like it had been resting just over the surface. It wasn't dramatic. It just eased upward without making a ripple or a splash that I could see. Then it stopped. It stayed perfectly still. No wobbling. No drifting with the wind. Just hanging there. I don't know how long I watched it. Maybe 20 seconds. Maybe 30. It felt longer. Then without any warning at all, it accelerated straight up. Not at an angle. Not gradually. Straight up. It didn't build speed like an airplane taking off. 1 second it was hovering over Lake Huron, and the next it shot vertically into the sky so fast my eyes almost couldn't keep up. Within maybe 2 seconds it was just a tiny point of light, and then it disappeared completely. No sound. No sonic boom. Nothing. The lake stayed just as calm as before. I stood there with the binoculars still in my hand for probably 5 minutes waiting for something else to happen. I kept expecting maybe I'd hear a helicopter or see another aircraft that would explain what I just watched. Nothing ever came. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying it in my head, trying to convince myself I'd misjudged what I was seeing. The next morning I walked down to the shoreline and just stared out over the same stretch of water. It looked completely ordinary. I've spent enough years on this lake to know what boats look like at night. I've watched Coast Guard helicopters, weather balloons, satellites, shooting stars, even the northern lights a handful of times. None of those looked or behaved anything like this. Maybe there's some kind of experimental aircraft I don't know about. Maybe there's an explanation that would make me feel pretty silly once I heard it. I'd actually be relieved if someone had one. But if you're asking me what I saw that night, the most honest answer I can give is this. I watched a glowing cigar-shaped object appear just above Lake Huron, hover in complete silence, and then leave faster than anything I've ever witnessed in my life. That's exactly how I remember it, and I haven't been able to explain it since. The main reason I'm finally posting this is because I've been reading through stories on here for the last couple weeks. Some of them sound a little out there, sure, but every once in a while I'll come across one that reminds me of what I saw over the lake. Plus all of the news and footage coming out lately. That finally got me thinking maybe I should say something. I've only told a handful of people about these sightings over the years. My brother was one of them before he passed, and a neighbor I used to have. Neither one really knew what to make of it. Most everyone else I've kept it to myself because I know how people react. Once you say you saw something strange in the sky, some folks immediately assume you've lost it. I'm not here trying to convince anybody that it was aliens or anything like that. I don't know what I saw. Maybe someone on here has an explanation that never occurred to me. What I'm really curious about is whether anyone else around Lake Huron, especially up near Rogers City or the northeast side of Michigan, has ever seen anything similar. Maybe I'm not the only one who's spent enough quiet nights watching the lake to notice something that doesn't quite fit. Anyway, that's my story. I know some people will probably roll their eyes. And honestly, I don't blame them. If someone had told me these same stories 20 years ago, I probably would have been skeptical too. I'm still skeptical by nature. I don't jump to conclusions, and I don't think every strange light in the sky means little green men. At the same time, I also think it's okay to admit when you've seen something you can't explain. Living out here by the lake has taught me a lot. You spend enough evenings watching the horizon and you get pretty familiar with what's normal. I've watched freighters, fishing boats, Coast Guard helicopters, storms rolling in from miles away, meteor showers, satellites, even the northern lights once or twice. After a while you develop a feel for how things usually look and move. Those 2 nights didn't fit into any of that. Maybe one day someone will explain exactly what I saw, and I'll be relieved to finally have an answer. I'd actually prefer that over spending the rest of my life wondering about it. Until then, all I can do is tell it the way I remember it. If anyone else has had similar experiences over Lake Huron or any of the Great Lakes, I'd genuinely like to hear about them. Doesn't have to be anything as dramatic as what I described. Even if you just saw lights that didn't make sense, I'd be interested. And if you think there's a perfectly ordinary explanation for either sighting, I'm all ears. I didn't post this looking for an argument. I posted it because after thinking about these 2 nights for years, I figured maybe somebody out there has seen the same thing. Or maybe knows something I don't.
Thanks for watching. If you want to hear more stories like these, please like and subscribe.